Welcome to Beyond the Brink, the show that dives headfirst into exploring global events that are pushing people to their limits and driving them to the brink of change. My name is Christy, and I'm here with Melissa.
Good morning.
Well, we're going to continue our conversation, our discussion about saving the children. If you missed last week's video, you're going to want to check that up and tee up for what's going to be discussed today. Now, on Monday, July the 2nd, the movie The Sound of Freedom, which exposes the global child sex trafficking ring, was just released, and it played in most movie theaters around the country. So if you haven't seen that yet, I recommend that you do. I saw it on Monday, the day that it came out, and it's a heartbreaker.
It is.
Today, we have a special guest who survived sexual abuse beginning at the age of 6, and it continued on into her early adulthood, and it left her with many emotional scars, painful scars. And today, I just want to just acknowledge her and congratulate her for her willingness to come out and share her story. It takes tremendous strength and courage to do that. And she's doing so to bring awareness and also maybe to provide some personal healing for herself. And she explains how children could be abused without other family members knowing, and the signs that something wrong. She's going to share with that, like, what does that look like to the parent that might just be questioning some odd behavior? Now, before we kick things off, if you're tuning in on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, show us some love with a thumbs up, a like, a subscribe, a Rumble. We'd greatly appreciate it so our channel can grow. And to those of you who are listening on the radio, we've got you covered too. You can catch up on all of our previous episodes by visiting our website at vidabroadcastnetwork.com. That's vidabroadcastnetwork.com. And you can find us on most of your favorite podcast sites by using the handle at Vida Broadcast. Now let's dive in. We're going to start with the Sound of Freedom trailer, and then we're going to bring out our guest, Leigh. Okay.
All right. I get this queued up. So here we go, folks. This is the trailer for Sound of Freedom.
How'd that make you feel? Giving a child his freedom.
Felt good.
You have been at this for 12 years.
My country, 'tis of thee.
Why are you doing it?
Sweet land of liberty.
Because God's children are not for sale. It is the fastest growing international crime network that the world has ever seen.
For Homeland Security, you know we can't go off rescuing Honduran kids in Colombia.
This job tears you to pieces. And this is my one chance to put those pieces back together.
And yet somehow you have failed to bring me one real-world lead.
It's over, Tim. Close up and come back home.
So you quit your job and you go and rescue those kids.
South of that river is all rebel territory. No one goes in.
What if this was your daughter?
Sorry, she's gone.
Hear that? That's the sound of freedom.
Sound of Freedom is one of those films that can legitimately change this world. So we want to ignite a fire in audiences and open their eyes to the dark reality of millions of children that need our help. Let's make this film a historic event and the start, the end of child trafficking. Theaters across this country are already selling out. Pre-order your tickets today, and you can send the message that God's children are no longer for sale.
And there were a lot of people there. You know, Melissa, I didn't share with you that in San Francisco, this is not widely reported. This was in an Israeli news organization that brought this out, that there were a number of barges located in the San Francisco Bay. And within those barges were a child's sex ring operation going on, and the Navy SEALs rescued those children.
Thank God.
I just find it reprehensible that we have not been told about this. It had to come from a foreign news site. But yeah.
Really makes you wonder.
Yeah. Well,
I can't even watch that without,
I'll tell
apologize,
you,
folks. It's an emotional topic for sure. And
yeah.
it's so
The-
important that we talk about it and we acknowledge what's happening.
Hey, when you go see the movie, it's not for it's not for the weak at all. You need to go in there and be willing to have your heart broken and have your stomach up in your throat, and you come out there with resolve that you're not going to let this happen.
I will say too, it was very tastefully done, and there's no, it's not sensationalizing it in any way.
Oh no, this
very well
is
done.
This is not to make money. This is to make a point.
Yep.
So shall we bring out our guest?
We shall. I will bring her in now. Welcome to the show, Leigh.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, welcome. Just want to say to you, I just admire your courage to come on out and talk to the people. We don't know how many people are listening, but I'm sure that your message is going to touch somebody, and just touching one person is it has a butterfly effect, and it will just multiply and help others that need to hear your message. I just want to thank you and applaud you for that. Leigh, before we went on air today, you were talking about how this journey, this life journey, horrible experience started for you at age 6. Would you like to tell us how that began and just take it away and tell your story, please?
Okay, and thank you. So I was 6 years old when my mom met a man, and at the time she was a single mom of 3 kids. And what I remember, she was looking for a dad for her kids, looking for a mate, somebody to help her. And she met this neighbor man who was married at the time and ended up leaving her for my mom. But anyway, he moved into our home after some drama, initial neighborhood drama. And from what I remember, at 6 years old, he started molesting me quite early on when he moved in. But from the time I was 6 to probably about 8-ish, my older siblings still lived at home, so it wasn't as frequent in the beginning as between like 8. It happened from 6 to 12, probably around age 8 when he finally had me isolated. It started happening more frequently, just inappropriate things. My mom was working, he was out of work, and so my mom went to work, and he's like, hey, I'll stay home with Leigh and take care of her, and just something that I'm constantly warning my single friends about, like, hey, if a guy suddenly has interest in being your babysitter instead of being a stand-up guy and helping you by working himself, it's a red flag. But anyway, so that all happened. It happened until 12, and then he stopped, I believe, because I started to look more like a woman. I aged pretty quick. I was heavy set because after being molested, I started eating as a wall. So I developed rather quickly. I didn't stay the tiny little girl that I was. And so around 12, it stopped. But the psychological and the, angry, abusive behavior still went on in the home. That was part of it. He was a very irrational, angry man. And finally, there was a point where he did something and it ended up hurting my mother. And at that point, at 14, I was just done. I mean, when I was little, he threatened my family. So, of course, I kept silent. I learned how to be a very good actress. I learned how to wear a mask so that people didn't know what was happening, because not only was he making me feel like it was my fault, but then the aspect of your mom, your siblings, I'll hurt them. But at 14,
like physical harm, he would do physical harm to them.
Yes. So by the time I'm 14, he did something that ended up causing my mom physical harm, and I just lost it. And I told her, and he had left the house right after the big explosion, and I'm telling her, Mom, he's a terrible man and he's got to go. And she's like, I know, but I'm married, and and I said, you really want to know why I hate him? Because Mama, I'm going to tell you what he did. And then I tell her, and I don't remember every moment of that. That's something I believe I blocked out quite a bit of that day, just because it was so emotionally, in good ways and in bad ways. But so my brother remembers my mom hitting her knees and screaming, finding this out. And what I will say I praise God that my mom believed me that minute. She threw him out. She called the police, everything. She protected me as best as she could.
Did the police do anything?
Yeah,
no. So they did interview me.
Okay.
And so, and this is a little bit blunt, but I'm just going to tell the world, because I fear that police don't really have a handle on how to investigate. Well, at least back then. But I had a female and a male officer in the room, and they basically said at one time, well, we gave him a polygraph and he passed half of it. And he told us that you actually were the one who initiated. And I'm sitting there as a 14-year-old girl in a police station thinking, you're telling me the man told you at 6 years old, I put on a nightie and seduced him. He's old, he's hairy, he's disgusting. You're telling me, I'm looking them in the face, and I didn't say this, it's in my mind. You actually believe that I seduced him.
Wow.
And I just stood up and I said, you know what? I lied. I made it up. I walked out. My mom wasn't in the room. They didn't even have my mom in the room when they were telling me this. And I said, Mom, let's go. I'm done. I'm not going to do this because they don't believe me anyway. And my mom's like, let me talk to him. And I'm like, nope. I just went in the car. I don't remember what happened, if there was any follow-up. I just know that after that, my mom got me into counseling shortly after, about, 14 and a half to 15 years old. And so here I am coming out of all that trauma, the molestation, the violent tempered man in my home, my mom was special needs. I don't use that, to say like, feel sorry for her, but it was hard for her to understand too, mentally, all of everything that was going on. So I'm coming out of that, 6 to 12 and 12 to 14 with all the violence and the aggression and the anger. And so they didn't believe me at the police station, or they made me feel like it was my fault. And I go into counseling and I get in these 4-H groups and these counseling circles. And what happens to me? I meet a man who's about 24, 25. I'm 14. He's flirting with me. He's supposed to be
counseling?
Yes. He was my counselor when I went to a 4-H camp. He was like the leader of like 5 of us, and there was like, say 4 or 5 counselors, 20 kids. Each counselor had a group of kids.
When you say 4-H camp, are you talking about like the animal organization 4-H?
So when I was a teenager, 4-H had aspects of it that also offered counseling.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's a different organization. I'm not certain, but I just remember it was called 4-H.
Well, it was like head, health, hands, and heart. And they had like an agricultural side of things.
I think So
Okay, because my exposure to 4-H was just on the agricultural side, but living on the West Coast and being primarily in cities, you didn't have a lot of agricultural available. So whatever little exposure to 4-H you got was you got to raise a lamb or you got to raise rabbits or something like that. And that was pretty much it.
Okay, well, that would have been awesome. But so yeah, I do, and again, it might not be the same, and they just might have called it 4-H, but that's very specific, something I remember.
So we want to be careful. We don't know which 4-H organization.
Correct. Yes, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't
No,
that, but I didn't
need
realize.
for you to apologize. It's just that this organization's all over the country. So anyway, but please.
So he's flirting with me and he's grooming me. Nothing physical happened with him until I was 16. But from 14 to 16, there was what I would call a relationship, a courting, if you will, a grooming, I call it now when I look back, but I didn't realize it at the time. So I'm in this counseling and this happens. And then I come back out of camp and I'm still involved in these big group counseling sessions where they had families come in with their children who've gone through trauma, and everybody kind of talked together of ways to cope and deal with these things. And I meet this kid and he's about my age and we befriend each other, and he's there with his dad. And, my mom and I and the son and the dad were all out talking in the parking lots after the counseling sessions and just, I don't know what you call it, just chatting. And I mentioned, I'm a singer. So that's where I say the enemy really was like, hey, I'm coming in here. I mentioned that I like to sing, and the man says, well, I have a brother in the music industry, in the local music industry, who could help you get into the music business. He made me sing for him in the parking lot or something. And, oh, you got a beautiful voice, pump me up. I'm going to connect you with my brother. So he connects me with his brother, who's in a, pretty, I would say in the state we're in, he's a decently, even today, high up in the music industry of our state, if you will. So it makes me feel a little worried, like, oh, how much access does he have to young artists still today? I don't know him anymore. I blocked him from my life many, many years ago. But anyway, so I met this music industry person in our local music, industry area. And he starts grooming me at, 14, almost 15 immediately. You're beautiful. I want to help you get into the music business. It was this older man who at first appeared to just be a kind, brotherly type figure, who also was telling me I was pretty and that I was special. And he knew everything that happened to me as a child because I told him early on. That's why I was in counseling, where I met his brother. And he knew all that. And he still it started off with comments and flirting and, 4 or 5 hour conversations on the phone. I'm 16, 15, 16 at that point. He's 35 or so. He's married. And then we started hanging out. He'd pick me up. He'd take me to his house. And even then, nothing physical. In the beginning, it was, hey, wear something a little tighter so I can look at your body and tell you how we're going to dress you as an artist. Was his way to get me to wear something revealing to his house. I'm 15, I'm like, okay. By 15, I had been, molested, and these things had been, these grooming incidents, these older men saying or doing inappropriate things to me. So it seemed so normal. And then it was, my wife doesn't love me. She rejects me. I'm a lonely man. I need somebody to understand me. I'm a music man. And I'm 16 by that point. And I'm like, oh, you poor man. Yeah. I'm so sorry. Because in my life, I felt alone. I had I love my mom. My siblings were great. I had some friends, but I felt very isolated because in my mind at that point, I'm filthy and dirty anyway, and I can't let anybody know who I really am. Right. And so I bought into it, and we started an affair. It lasted a couple years, from 16 to, nearly 18. And, then it got to a point where, I just kind of got away from him. He led me, and after all that, he led me into another local studio with some other musicians to do some demo CDs. And those men, so I believe that he was trying to pass me on to them. Because they started, there would be comments like, I heard this about you. And I would think the only person who would know that is the guy who brought me in here. And so, they tried to be sexual with me. They tried to, hey, you're pretty hot. I'm 16. And these are like men in their mid 30s and 40s.
Yeah. But
I'm already so overwhelmingly ashamed and beaten down by, you're the, it wasn't even, I didn't even feel like a victim. It was like, you're the dirty one. You made this happen to yourself. So I couldn't even be mad that happened to me at the time.
Well, yeah. Can I ask a question? You said that the brother of this man had a son that was in counseling with you, Leigh.
Yes.
Was that son abused as well?
I don't remember the exact reason he was in the because it was like family trauma counseling.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if it was some other trauma, but I did know basically the kids in the program, it wasn't the parents getting the counseling, it was the children. So it was the children, and they were bringing in the parents to kind of help the healing, if you will, the coping with how to handle the trauma. Right. But it was different. I mean, I remember specifically there was one girl whose brother was murdered, and she was just on drugs at like 12, 13 years old. And so I'm not certain what his trauma was, but I will say that what I remember of the dad that I met in counseling, the brother of the music guy, he was, I use the word smarmy a lot, but kind of. The buddy guy put his arm around a 16-year-old girl's shoulder right in front of her mom, and, hey, you're cute and you can sing. I'm gonna tell my brother about you. And so I feel like the whole family, those that I did meet in this family were pretty just off.
Inappropriate,
yeah, for sure.
Wow. You mentioned in a conversation prior to coming on air how this affected you and how it kind of introduced you into drugs or realizing that drugs was a way to kind of deaden this shame or bad feelings that you had. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I started drinking and smoking cigarettes about 12 years old. So it was, when the molestation and the stuff like that stopped happening in the home. He still lived there, like I said, a couple more years, but I was already, here I am, literally 12, 13 years old, going to college parties in my local city, getting drunk, getting wasted, grown men driving my friends and I, we're all 13, 12, 13, 14 around in their cars. I just started partying, and I didn't do pills until I was around 16, but I started with the alcohol, the, pot, just anything that my friends were trying.
Can I ask you that? So you just mentioned, so not only are you 12, 13 and you're going to these college parties, so yet more adults that are preying on
yes,
12-year-old.
And I tell you, I know I'm not on camera, I got the avatar, but at 12, 13, even 14, 15, I looked like a little girl still. I have a baby face. So I'm certain they didn't mistake me for a 17, 18-year-old. I'm certain of it. I can't say I was at that point actively drinking and smoking and all that stuff. There might be times I don't remember bad things happening because I would literally drink, fifths of liquor at that age. Mm. And I wanted to drown everything out. So then I did that. And then 16, I had a back injury. And at the time I had a guardian and, because I was just a real troubled teenager. And I hurt my back and I went to the ER and they ended up prescribing me a bottle of narcotics. So my guardian should have had those. I was a minor. They should have prescribed them in her name or let her know anything, but they didn't. I got them. I was able to go fill them. And I don't even think at that time my guardian even would have realized, you have a back injury, you go to the doctor, they give you pain medicine. She probably didn't realize that I would in turn then probably abuse them, because who would have, back then, it wasn't such a big, like it is today, when you got people like going to doctors just to get their fix, and that's a sad thing and a lot of people who've been assaulted as children will end up in that place because we're trying to numb everything. But so I ended up getting a bottle of pills, took them. I'm 16, passed a few out to my friends, but then I realized I really like the numbness this comes with. I don't feel
Especially
so.
with alcohol, huh?
Yeah, and because yes, I was still drinking, and I praise the Lord I'm alive today, because boy, did I really try to take myself out from, say 12 on up into my 20s. I mean, I had a 20-year pill addiction.
Leigh, when you mentioned your guardian, was your mom still in the picture at the time?
She was, but like I said, my mom not only did she have special needs, but she just mentally, at that point, she's a single mom.
Right.
She's trying to pay the bills and take care of me. My siblings were moved out by then, but she just couldn't control me. I was running away. They were finding me in drug houses in the south side of the city. So she called and said, "Hey, you got to come get my daughter.
Got
I
it.
can't take care of her." So I was in foster care for about a year.
Okay.
And then I had a very, wonderful person in my life who agreed to be my guardian and take me into their home. And I did well for a while. I did well in her home for a while, but then these people that were grooming me from like 14 up started being more prevalent around 16. And, I'm hiding that from my guardian. She has no idea. And, and so I just continued on that path of self-destruction from that point. I did the pills started at 16. Once I knew what that could do for me, I sought it out. I faked injuries to go get the pills. I became an addict. And I tell people I was a full-blown addict for 20 years. I would steal pills out of medicine cabinets because I needed something to numb me. And by that point, doctors were starting to go, "Hey, you keep hurting yourself. What's going on?" And so it was a really rough 20 years, but with all that being said, I will have 8 years clean of all of my addictions this December.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a rough ride, but so, I mean, I made a lot of choices at, 16, 17, 18 up and even into my 20s. I mean, I met my husband at 35. I was on a path to self-destruction up until I met my husband that I'm married to today. I really tried to destroy myself. I got up to over 400 pounds, severe diabetic, near death so many times, because on top of all that, here I am drinking like that still. I mean, fifth of liquor, pills, maybe some beer too. I mean, I just as drunk or high as I could get myself, so I didn't have to think about all the things that happened, is where I ended up for about 20 years. And I really want people to understand, I know that addiction's it's a controversial thing and people have things to say about it, but I would always say, when you look at an addict, look at their childhood, look at their life. Right. There has to be a place where that really, where I say the devil used it to come on in and further destroy that person.
Yeah.
I made my choices, and I admit that freely, but at the same time, I'm glad that I'm healed enough today to say, I know what and again, the devil, this is who is behind all these evil, disgusting, filthy things. And he sent that into my home. I had I was telling a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, I had a happy childhood up until that.
Right.
My mom was single, but I had my siblings and I was happy. And I was very loved and a cherished little girl. And
when you mention, it makes me think about how this person ended up in your mom's life. She must have had, I think you had saying that she went through divorce and was looking for that person who could be the father figure in the home. So she herself was vulnerable and open. Her vulnerability opened that door for this evil to walk through.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And it's unfortunate. My mom's been gone. It'll be 2 years this August. But she carried that guilt and that with her whole life. But I kept, I got to walk her home. I was with her. I always knew I was going to take care of her. She was my baby. Yeah. But I did my very best the last several years of her life, especially when I knew that she was getting closer to leaving. Mama, I don't blame you.
Right.
Don't carry that, Mama. I said, Mama, how many children tell their mom or their dad, "Hey, so-and-so has molested me." And the parent says, "Well, let's not tell anybody." Or, "Oh, they didn't mean to hurt you." Because I know many, many, many people that I grew up that endured that. So I'm grateful that she did protect me in the end when she knew that she needed to. But there's a lot of women in that vulnerable place. If you think about it, a lot of my friends are single parents.
I have a question. So
Sure.
what do you think the signs were? Like what would you suggest to people? I mean, if it went from 6 to 12 in that time frame, was there anything that could have shed some light on that? You know?
Well, yeah, I would say that my behavior started being very dramatic. I remember that I didn't want to go to school for a long time. I was, 6, 7, 8. I did not want to go to school. And my sister used to walk me to school. She'd have to drag me. I would lay on the ground and say, I don't want to leave. I didn't want to leave home because I was afraid he would hurt somebody in my home while I was gone. I was afraid that he'd hurt my mother, and I couldn't tell anybody why. So I just made up these dramatic things. And so, if you see a child that suddenly just changes from this happy little girl to absolutely irrationally upset and scared and fearful, there has to be a reason. It doesn't always mean molestation, but it means something traumatic to a child has happened to cause them to change dramatically. Or if you notice there's adults paying special attention to your child or your teenager. Hey, I know you're struggling with your 12-year-old. She's giving you a hard time. Well, I'll be Uncle so-and-so and I'll get her in line for you. You know what? Red flag. That's my honest opinion, especially somebody of the opposite sex to that. But then, nowadays.
Yeah, you never know.
You never know. I mean, women, and I will say this, something that I remembered earlier when I was thinking about all this. There were women that I came across who did kind of, it sucks to say it like this, but almost pimped me out. Like, hey, I have this girl over here babysitting for me. If you want to show up at my house, she'll probably let you do what you want. That happened to me once. I think I was 18 at that time, and I was babysitting for this lady, and she left, and then this guy came over and he said, so-and-so told me you were here alone babysitting, and, she thought we might like each other. But, I'm like 18, but he was like 30. And I did not want that, but it was like,
so many predators in this world.
And one, I'm one girl in one small town here in my state. And like I said, at least 10, people from 6 to even, 18, but probably more. And I have multiple friends who endured similar things from multiple people. So one small town, you're looking at 30, 40, 50 perverts, and we're talking mid-90s. Imagine what it's like now.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And now they're not even really hiding it anymore.
Well, now they have tools to communicate on the internet and cell phones and
What do you think, in your experience, you kind of, you didn't say it, but it sounds as though these people were mostly interested in the prepubescent period. Why do you think that is? Could it be because the child is just so innocent and not knowing, or what do you think that's about?
I mean, in my mind, I think, and I can't speak for every person who does that. From my experiences and from what I gathered through my experiences, it was the innocence. It was like a drive to take that innocence and then keep it for themselves as long as they could. And once I started developing into what looked like more of a woman instead of a child, I no longer looked innocent. I looked like, I'm older. I developed very early in life. I mean, by 10 years old, I had to buy a bra. So I was a developed girl, and I really think that is why the man who, originally started, that's why he stopped. But there are also those out there who like the teenage girl. You're barely legal, we'll just compromise, or, there's a thrill in that they made me feel like there was a thrill in that.
We spoke earlier, and we talked about, the 80s, 90s movies, and how it was acceptable. And I didn't really think about it, but, you're thinking about the 16 Candles and those movies where they're showing young females' breasts, or think back to the horror films almost always. And then we're portraying young girls and boys naked.
Right.
And everyone just kind of glossed over it like it's, this is acceptable.
Yeah. It made it all right for grown men to watch a movie where a supposed teenage girl is showering in the locker room at high school. And you think,
Right.
is that really what you want to convey? Why did that even have to be in that movie? I mean, I liked those movies until recently. My husband and I tried to watch it. And I was like, because I told him, I'm so sorry. I said, I bought the movie. I loved it. And then he's like, I don't really think this is great for us. We're really, we're in our faith now. We're trying to be away from those things.
Right.
And so it was a big eye opener to even back in my childhood and my youth, just how much sex was put out there to numb us, to normalize us to young sex.
See, that's what this whole thing is about. I mean, you were young enough, and this has been going on for a very, very long time, about the grooming and how perverse this has become. It's so perverse that these people can't stay in the shadows anymore. I think that they believe that there's enough of them to where they can come out and say, this is just kind of normal.
Yeah.
And it is not. Leigh, I have a question for you. Were any of these men you were exposed to, were they into pornography in any way? Did they have pornography on their TVs? Did they try to get you into pornography? I'm kind of curious about that.
Well, I wouldn't say most of those situations. The man that started with at 6 years old, no, there was none of that involved. However, he did use very vulgar language. And remember, I'm 6, and he asked me if I wanted to F word.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no. And he goes, okay, I was just testing you.
Wow.
Which was really weird, as you're touching me inappropriately, to say I was just testing you. But that's kind of how perverts are. They're weird.
Yeah.
Sorry. But later on, the original man from the music business, like I said, he took me to that studio.
Yeah.
And one of the man who owned the studio, showed me a porn video. He wanted me to watch it with him. Again, I'm 16, and it was really uncomfortable, but I just sat there and watched it with him, because here I am wanting to be, I am a singer. I love to sing. And I just was like, okay, well, this is normal. Men have been doing this to me since I was 6 years old. I guess this is just what I have to endure. So I just sat there. It was never acceptable or comfortable. None of it was. But I was so darn broken by then that I was just like, well, I guess this is what I'm worth.
Right.
And, it took me a really long time. And I'm talking even to recently to even love myself again.
Sure. Can imagine.
But yeah, there was a lot of, and then later on in life, there were men who, and again, I'm, even though at over 18, what I did find then was men that were just as abusive or weird. I'm older now, I'm an adult now, but the way that I went through all that, and then I'm trying to have a normal dating life, I just ended up with abusive after abusive relationships. Some of them just mentally, some physically, some sexually, but very, very, very abusive. And I took it all, thinking it was what I should take.
You had mentioned that you seem to have friends that had experienced some similarities. They were from broken families as well. Do you think that it sounds as though that there was only things had gone so far with various people that you had these experiences with, but had they gone on any farther, do you think that there might have been the possibility of being trafficked, or they might have been involved in trafficking in any way?
I would say absolutely. The music business scene, yes. Because again, if you have, I don't ever say to people I was trafficked. I will say I was groomed and people were trying to share me. So that music guy in the beginning, and then, he takes me to that studio, and those guys are making references to me like they knew that they could if they wanted to, and seeing if I'd be interested type of thing. It could have only come from him going and telling them, hey, this little teenage girl will, let you do what you want. So I feel like that there were times when people were those men were trying to pass me around.
Just testing you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't say I was, ever trafficked, but would I suspect that of those men? I'm not sure that they were not very smart. Now that I'm an adult and I look back at their behavior, I'm thinking, yeah, you weren't very smart. You were just dumb, and you're blessed you didn't, praise the Lord and go seek repentance because you didn't go to prison for what you did.
Right.
But they weren't very smart men.
Mm.
They didn't, they didn't even really hide it if you think about it. I mean, they smiled in my mother's face and in my siblings, a couple of them, they knew my siblings because, again, they were mentoring me musically, remember, and helping me with my
Right.
career.
Mm-hmm.
So for a while after all that, I get in my 20s, I didn't want to sing at all. And I love to sing. It's my gift from the Lord. I just love it. It's part of my healing. It's part of everything. But for a while I didn't sing, and I didn't want to, because those experiences in the music business were so jading and so broken that I thought, well, maybe I'm wrong, that maybe this is not a place for me. So I didn't sing for a long time. I didn't want to. And then I would say, later on in life, shortly before I met my husband, but predominantly after I started listening to worship music and seeking my relationship. I always believed in God, but I always thought he doesn't want me. Look at all the things that I let happen to me. So I ran from God for a long time, but now I just want to, that passion got taken away from me. My passion for life at 6 years old got taken. I changed from a very happy, hopeful, bright little girl to a little girl who just cried all the time and was dramatic and trying to say to somebody, I'm not okay, I'm not okay, I'm not okay, but I didn't know how to say it.
Right.
So I go from that and then the music business thing, and it took so much joy away from me that what once gave me full joy no longer gave me joy. And it was so sad now that I think about it, because music has always been really healing for me. But
this, what you just said kind of brought up what we were talking about in a previous episode, as far as children, developmentally, their brains aren't fully functioning, fully formed, and here you're acting out for everyone to see, but nobody really understands, and you don't have another way of communicating it because you don't know what to say. And I think that stems from not being fully developed emotionally. Your brain's not fully developed, and unless someone recognizes the symptoms or the signs of a child in duress, you can easily get labeled as that troubled child, right? We always hear of, the kids, they want to put them on Ritalin and all these other drugs because, little Johnny, little Sarah's acting up in school. And so there was a big wave of just drugging the kids because they're having outbursts in school. And here there's someone like yourself who was trying to communicate that something really wrong was going on, and you were, it was overlooked. And that's unfortunate. We need to do a better job of recognizing if a kid is acting out, most likely there's something much worse going on than just being a naughty little child, right?
Yeah, I was definitely labeled a problem child from the time I was, 5th grade or so up. It was, Heather,
how did that make you feel? How did that make you feel also?
I mean, it made me feel terrible because I was like, I can't tell these people what really happened, but if only they knew. I'm not just freaking out because I'm a bad person. Like, I don't know how to handle this. Like, I remember, especially when I got a little older, the 12, 13, it was like, I would cry and cry. Why can't they see how hurt I am? Why do I even have to say it? Can't you see? Because I knew I was acting irrationally. I knew I was acting crazy. Right. And they do, when you get to a certain point, they will start drugging you. Yeah. And it didn't happen early for me. I think I was either 17 or 18. probably 18 the first time I was prescribed an antidepressant through counseling and, seeing a psychiatrist. Heather's having a hard time. She's got to go see a shrink, or, so-and-so's having a hard time. She's got to go see a shrink. And, that's how people kind of blow it off. Whoever's going through the thing, they just say, oh, so-and-so is, they're just going a little crazy. And so I did end up on many antidepressants.
I'm sorry. You just made me flash on it. So you were being prescribed antidepressants by a medical doctor. Did you have any faith counseling back then, or did that come later on in your life?
No, that came later on in my life. I will say, so my brother was very, he was into God when he was a teenager, and he gave me a Bible. And so, I always believed in God, but my mom believed in God, but she didn't go to church. She didn't raise us in a church. So I just had random experiences with faith and all that kind of stuff. And I do remember that I did meet some believers, that I wouldn't say in the counseling arena, but believers who I really think God planted in my life in those times, that they always made me feel more loved than I knew how to feel for myself. So while they weren't professional counselors, I will say that the truest counseling I needed did come from people like that. People who, even though they didn't know what happened to me and I hadn't confessed to them all the things I felt ashamed of, they would, by then I'm a very overweight young woman, and they would say things like, you're beautiful. And, I don't understand why you're struggling so much. You're so talented. You have this, you have that. And they would try, and I'm praying for you. And, maybe seek God. And at the time I'm an addict and I'm very sick, and I'm like, oh, okay. But in my mind, it was, God doesn't want me.
Right.
He's not going to want me. He's like perfect. And I did believe in that. I believed that God was perfect. And so I just thought, when you're young, God doesn't want me because this happened.
Right.
And but later on I did, I got, I have a pastor I've known since I was a very young girl. He actually married my husband and I. He was always very present and influential in my faith, especially like around my 30s. Because I remembered him from when I was younger. I knew he had become a pastor, and he was just somebody that I thought was one of the most beautiful, believing souls I ever met. And I loved everything he stood for when I was younger. And later on, when we reconnected and all that, I was so grateful for his presence in my life, because he was somebody that I saw as somebody probably the closest to God I'd ever known. And he loved me and treated me like I was of value and wanted to help me see, how much God loved me and stuff. So I really wish it would have came earlier, but we all have a journey, and it did finally come, and it came in what I think is the right time. I was thinking about this earlier, just in quick reference to that, to faith-based counseling and all that. I went through these terrible things, and they did hurt me. And I still have a little bit of scars here and there. I'll have flashbacks or memories I don't like. But after all that I went through and who I am today, I feel like the phrase, it's in Esther of the Bible, where it says, perhaps you were born for such a time as this. And I feel like that everything I went through, now I'm beyond that. It's your fault. I'm at a point now where I'm saying, I went through that. I overcame it. The Lord rescued me out of it. And now it's time. It's such a time for me to help other people see that their rescue is at hand. Whether they are children getting rescued out of sex trafficking, which is a very important issue right now. And I pray and pray and pray about it every day. Lord, help the little ones, bring it to light, from dark to light, bring it, because these people cannot keep doing this. Or there's somebody like me who wasn't trafficked, but you endured things like that.
Right.
And you feel like you're not good enough, or you're so broken you can't be healed. Like, I want people to know that that's possible. And for that to be possible, those of us who have been through things like that, we ought to be speaking up, and we ought to be coming for that act. I'm not saying we go out and we start, baseball bat and the child molesters, because you know what? That's not going to fix it. We have to we have to bring it to light. We have to show it, the proof, show the proof, show us what's happening. Let these children come out, encourage your children to speak out about it, and then protect them from the monsters.
Yes. Sunlight is sterilizing.
It is. Yes.
Well, and I often say, pay attention to your child, listen to them, have conversations with them about different things. And the more that you get to know your child, the more that you may realize that something's not quite right,
Right.
with that child. I think a lot of times we get so busy because, there's 2-parent families working, nobody's home, everybody's so busy and we got to have dinner and then it's time for bed that you might not actually know your child. And,
Right.
And we need to know them, and we need to listen to them and hear them.
Right. Keep
Yeah,
the
and
TV off.
Yeah, I would say it's even important. Like, I don't have any children, but I got my eyes on any child in my life. I got my eye on them, and I watch and I pay attention to the things they tell me and the words they say and their body language, because I am on that lookout. And I think that that's important, even if you're not a parent. If you have children in your life, your nieces and nephews, your best friend's kids, your whoever. If you see that child is changing or something's going on, say something. There was a woman, I remember, she was a friend of my mom's, and later on, I was in my 20s or 30s, and she said, well, I always knew something was going on in your house, but I didn't want to get involved.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I want to tell you, folks, those who know me, I will get involved on a child's behalf. I'm not afraid of those monsters anymore. We have to shut them down.
Right.
You don't want them to end up at 20 years addictions and getting to a point where they're so obese that, they're afraid to go to sleep, because that is part of a reaction to trauma.
Right.
Yes.
I will say my mom was heavy set. And so at, 6 to 8 years old, once I had heard my mom's husband say something negative about her body being overweight. So I took that internally as, okay, go get fat. And he'll stop touching you.
Oh, boy.
So I
Yes.
started eating. And by the time I was 12, also on top of becoming a woman, that figure coming out, I was about 200 pounds at that point at 12. Even
And
adults
just-
mostly shouldn't be 200 pounds.
And I'm sure you were probably bullied and all of that by school classmates and stuff like that who'd love to pick on things like that.
Oh yeah, and we were poor, so I wore the hand-me-downs and the welfare thick Coke bottle glasses, and when I brought a lunch, it was cheap bologna sandwiches, and I got picked on for all of it, every bit of who I was.
Did you have to wear the Wonder bags on your feet in the wintertime?
I absolutely did. And I will say this, nowadays I might even do it depending on what shoes I got to wear, because it did keep, but yeah, we had to do all that. We got the government cheese, which is still, I say, the best cheese there was. But, those of us who grew up in that system, we do understand those little perks. Perks of being poor.
Leigh, I'm sure it wouldn't come to a surprise to you, but another survivor out there, a lady named Kathy O'Brien, in her autobiography, she spoke about the music industry and how there were many victims of trafficking, exploitation in that industry, and it was used as a cover for these predators. And so when you were saying your story, it's like no surprise there. And if you remember was it Henry Weinstein or
Harvey
Weinstein?
Oh, yeah.
The audition couch, so to speak.
Yeah.
All of that. Why is it all centered around music and film? There's something in that industry. I think it's the cultivator for this perverse industry that they have, that's called child exploitation, trafficking, things that they do, the things we've been reporting about.
Think about how powerful that is that not only are you victimizing the people that want to get into the music industry, right? You're using them, and then once they're in, they're controlled, and then they're pushing it out in the visuals and the songs and all of
Right.
that, which is kind of pushes that agenda even
Like,
further, and it
Brit-
normalizes it.
Britney Spears is a classic example to me when I look at her. There's
Yeah.
she beautiful, talented, precious young woman
Right.
gets into the entertainment industry, and suddenly she's rich, she's famous, she has everything you could probably want, right? Suddenly she's shaving her head in public and wigging out. And I've seen videos of her, and where she was just completely out of it. And you think, this is what the entertainment industry does for our young people? Because that's not normal. Justin Bieber behavior is not normal.
Miley Cyrus.
Not normal.
Yeah.
And
You know,
people are numb to that. They're numb to that.
the Britney Spears situation, I just found it interesting that beyond becoming once she became an adult, she was still under conservatorship from her father for what, another 20 years, and she just
Right.
finally was able to break free of that. And here
Mhm.
we're finding out the father really was in it for his own self-interest. This is
Mhm.
why he was keeping her under conservatorship.
Yeah.
Imagine how she felt, as everybody, she's so publicly adored, yet she's a prisoner in her own.
Just wild. Just wild that could be done to a young woman who really, and if you look at it from that aspect, I was, young, and I wanted to sing. It was all I ever wanted.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, all this tragedy happens within a local music scene. To this day, I praise God that he said no to a career when I was that young, that it didn't
Right.
go further than local, because I would have been dead. I would have gotten on more drugs. I would have had the ability to self-destruct even more. So I'm glad. And today I belong to a wonderful church. I'm part of the worship team. I sing probably 25 songs a day. I sing around my house. I sing in the car. I love music again. It's so I just want to keep reiterating, there is hope out of these situations.
We're pretty much at we're right up against the clock, and we're wondering if for about a minute, if you have a closing statement you'd like to say, and we can bring you back on for another discussion at another time, if that's good for you. What would you like to close with?
I just, I want to say to, especially, I'm talking to everybody. I want you to pay attention to what's happening to children. Go see the movie, by the way, that's coming out, Sound of Freedom. Just enough said. You'll get it, your eyes open to a lot of things that you might not. Mainstream media is not going to tell you what's happening to our littles. I want people to know that have been through some of the things, maybe worse than I've been through. You are still valuable. You are still loved. You are still important. You still have something to offer. Like, I get emotional, but I know that this is still happening to many children who are going to turn into adults who will self-medicate or self-harm or any of those things out of response, and maybe lead themselves into death when they really have so much to offer the world.
Indeed.
So I just don't give up. Know that it wasn't your fault, and that you're still loved and valuable. And please speak out. Contact this show. I'm sure they'd love to interview more people to get this message out that we can overcome. And I'm believing that for you. And I just pray that you'll do that.
Leigh, we want to thank you for being here today. Incredible story. Thank you for sharing it with us and our audience. And for our listeners, please share this so this can get out to others. And let's try to stop this.
Yes.
Yeah, the more eyes that we have on this, and the more that we acknowledge, the closer we are to putting this to an end.
Yeah. Let's get in the battle.
You bet. Well, with that, we'll see you all next time. Thank you for joining us here on Beyond the Brink.
Thank you. Have a good day.